We're so excited to have you all here today to talk about this topic that we are very passionate about at Fohr, which is how to spot invisible influence. So before we dive right on in, just a little bit about us for anyone who isn't super familiar. So we are Fohr. We consider ourselves an ambassador marketing company. We are based in New York City, the greatest city in the world. We have an incredible team of people here at Fohr who really help us bring to life influencer marketing that doesn't have that kind of transactional, awkward ick that we often see with influencer marketing. So sometimes that's long-term programs. Sometimes we just approach our short-term work with an ambassador mindset and really focus on not spending good money on fake love. So it looks like we have some amazing people joining in the chat. Hello to everyone. Hello to some of our clients who are in the chat. Quick snapshot of some of the amazing brands that we are so blessed to work with here today. Hello to anyone who we haven't spoken to before. Hello to some of our competitors who may be here or other industry folk. Again, super excited to chat about this. This is something that we are really excited to dig into and to teach you all a little bit more about and to hear more from you on what you're thinking about as it relates to invisible influence. So today we're going to hear from an amazing group of people. To introduce myself for a moment, I'm just really pump my own tires up there saying it's an amazing group, and then I'll introduce myself. But I'm Grace Murray. I'm the VP of Strategy here at Fohr. I've been here now for nearly 9 years, which is kind of wild to say. So joined the company when it was 3 people working out of an apartment. Been really crazy to see the whole industry explode. I will be joined today by the incredible Calvin Walker, who is our Director of Strategy and an absolute delight. We also have Sophie Wood, who coined the term invisible influence. So it'll be very important to hear from her, but she's a senior creative strategist here at Fohr and also a lifestyle influencer herself. Then we have 2 members of the Fohr community, Hitha and Alexis. Hither is incredible. She does all of the things. She's multi-hyphenate. I'll let her properly introduce herself as well, but she's a CEO, an author, a speaker, and someone that we started working with based on her invisible influence. And same goes for Alexa, who is an incredible member of our Sephora squad, about to go into our 5th year of the squad, and excited to hear from them at the end of today. So today, we'll be covering a few things. The first that we're going to be covering is, first of all, what invisible influence is, looking beyond those vanity metrics and ultimately how we define it. The next piece is how to spot it. Obviously, it's great to know what it is, but if you can't ultimately identify people who have it, it's really no use to you and truly is invisible. So we're going to be talking about tools that we have access to at Fohr that help you find that invisible influence. But we're also going to be talking about just some tips and tricks for maybe if you don't have access to Fohr, if you don't have access to technology, ways that you can kind of more, in a little more analog type of a way, keep an eye out for someone who has that influence, even if they don't have a huge audience on the surface. We think a lot about the difference between influence and audience. So excited to dig more into that. And then, of course, we'll be going in real life, talking it through with these amazing women that we have on the line today, Hither and Alexa. So before we dive in, I just want to say today I'm feeling a little Catherine O'Hara in Home Alone. I have been to 3 cities this week. I say this because I know that it's Q4. I know that everyone's under a lot of pressure. I know that everyone's incredibly busy. We're so stoked to have you all here today. This is the highlight of my day to be able to do this with our team. And again, we're super excited to be able to dig into it at all. But I'm definitely feeling like I've been to Chicago, to Paris, to Dallas, and where the hell am I? And we're here and we're talking about it and we're going to dive right on in. And so to kick things off, Sophie Wood is going to talk us through this definition. Again, she coined the term. And so I will throw to her.
Awesome. Hey, y'all. As Grace mentioned, I'm Sophie Wood. I'm a senior creative strategist here at Fohr. Super stoked to kind of walk us through where invisible influence came from and kind of what it means. So to start, kind of give the origin story of invisible influence. It was really born out of the struggle that we had of trying to make brands see past a minimum engagement rate and consider partnering with influencers who maybe don't have like an astronomical engagement rate, but they very well have a strong connection and relationship with their audience. So Grace was actually the one who coined the analogy of iceberg influencer, which really goes hand in hand with invisible influence. And that's kind of like where we can think of like, you know, what we see on the surface and what we can uncover on a deeper level. So at the very tip of the iceberg, you know, like metaphorically above water, we're able to see a surface level connection with their audience. And that's really through vanity metrics. So we can consider vanity metrics, you know, engagement rate, content style, follower count, everything that's kind of just surface level. But underneath this metaphorical surface of the iceberg, we can uncover a much deeper connection with an influencer's audience. So this is really where invisible influence comes into play. We think of it being everything that's below the surface. And so some metrics or factors to consider when looking for invisible influence and trying to find it with partners that could be right for you are through testimonials, blog traffic, newsletter subscriptions, trackable sales, engagement in the DMs or engagement in comments, consistent over delivery on campaigns, and verified reach. And so you really may be thinking like, this is truly too good to be true. And surely it's just an anomaly. Like there's only a handful of influencers that have invisible influence. But luckily we're here to tell you that it is not an anomaly. It is very much so tried and true with many influencers and so many that we tend to work with time and time again. And to kind of put that into perspective, to kind of show how this really comes to life, we've pulled out 3 iceberg influencers. All of these are completely real stats of real influencers with their names hidden for privacy. So to start, you know, we have an influencer with a 0.9% engagement rate, 190K followers, another one with 0.3% engagement rate, 55,000 followers, and then an influencer with 0.8% engagement rate and 135,000 followers. So let's say in like a hypothetical situation, you're a brand that requires that all of your partners need to have at least a 2% engagement rate. So already all of the influencers here listed are immediately ruled out. There's no way that you are working with them. But then if you were to look past those vanity metrics and dig deeper into indicators of a deep relationship with their audience, you would have uncovered an immense amount of invisible influence. So the same influencer who had a 0.9% engagement rate also had $600,000 of trackable sales in one of our year-long ambassador programs. And that's also not including sales that aren't trackable. So if someone, you know, went into a store and bought something that they recommended, we have no record of that, but they also, you know, sold those in. They have 280,000 website sessions and over 1,000 testimonials. And then the other influencer with a 0.3% engagement rate has 20,000 website sessions, over 60,000 newsletter subscriptions with a 55% open rate, which is huge, and over 700 testimonials. And then last, the influencer with a 0.8% engagement rate has 90,000 website sessions, over 1,700 testimonials, and 86% of their audience has made a purchase based on the recommendation. And so again, in like our hypothetical situation where you're a brand that requires a 2% engagement rate in order to work with them, you missed out on working with immensely impactful influencers with major invisible influence. And so we started to think about kind of the why behind traditional engagement rates being the end all be all. And we came to the conclusion that engaging with a post by like throwing it a like or a comment with an emoji is definitely proof of attention and, you know, positive affinity, but it is an extremely low barrier to entry for followers. So it's a super passive and frequent action. I am someone who truly throws around likes all the time as I'm scrolling through my feed. I could look at it for 0.2 seconds and I'm like, sure, and then keep scrolling. And we also have no like real insight into the why behind someone liking a post. So ultimately, it really gives us no qualitative proof of audience connection and trust. And then when we compare traditional engagement to testimonials, we found that testimonials are a much better way to quantify and qualify invisible influence. So if you're not familiar with testimonials, I know I've said it a bunch of times already, but testimonials are basically a Fohr-only practice where any influencer registered on our platform can ask their audience to leave them a testimonial where, you know, a follower of theirs will basically submit a testimonial explaining why they follow them and what areas of their life this specific influencer influences, essentially. And when we think about the process of like quickly engaging with the post by liking it, like how I just described it, I do all the time, and then compare that to leaving an influencer a testimonial, we know that it's a much higher barrier to entry for the audience where there's essentially nothing in it for them in return. You know, they're taking time out of their day to do something for an influencer that they feel like deeply connected to and really want to see them succeed with nothing in it for themselves. And their testimonials give us really deep and clear insight into the why behind someone's influence or audience connection, which Grace is going to get into later. So testimonials ultimately give us a proof of like a very solid and deep connection between audience and creator. It also shows us a connection that's deep enough that they want to see the creator succeed. And then it also, something that I think gets overlooked a lot is that it shows that they're able to move their audience to action, where if you're someone who is like, sales conversion is so big for us, seeing that an influencer was able to be like, hey, can you post a testimonial about me, and got their audience to do it, shows that they're able to like move them into action similar to sales. So that's kind of invisible influence in a nutshell.
The nutshell, we love. Beautiful. Amazing. So, you know, incredible to have it there, but how do you spot it? And again, I do want to call out from the beginning that we're going to start here with some Fohr technology, but we're also going to talk about ways of identifying this type of influence, even if you don't have access to this type of technology, because there's definitely, even when we have it, we're still doing this more manual, more human look to see, is this someone who has influence, or does this person just have an audience? So the first piece of discovering invisible influence, again, Sophie's just referenced those testimonials. Testimonials to me is truly one of the most powerful pieces of technology in the space, in that it really does quantify that connection between an influencer and their audience. Sophie mentioned it shows that they're able to move them to an action. If an influencer is essentially saying, hey, guys, I love working with brands who make sense for me, who are a perfect fit. I don't want to be working with brands where it doesn't make sense for me. In order for me to get those partnerships, it's really helpful for me to be able to show the influence and the impact that I have on you. It'd be so helpful if you could just swipe up, leave me a testimonial. It takes 2 minutes, and it's so helpful for me in getting the types of partnerships that I want. That's essentially how influencers are getting these testimonials. They're asking their audience for them. So when we dive into the Fohr platform, we're able to filter by volume of testimonials. And I do want to call out that, you know, jumping into Fohr, not every single influencer by any means has testimonials as a part of their profile. In fact, it is a very, very small percentage of the 200,000-ish people who are on Fohr. Because again, it is asking their audience to complete this action, and it's moving those audience members to the Fohr site to leave this testimonial, to answer a survey about their purchase intent, and to give us that information to say, yep, this is someone who I really deeply trust and admire. And so by filtering by this number of testimonials, this shows kind of in deeper detail that the level of detail the audiences are going to in terms of explaining why they follow this person, what they find influential about them, what they like about them, what they connect to in their content. And again, ultimately, how many times or how frequently their purchase decisions are impacted by this individual. So we have Hither, who is going to be chatting to Calvin today and diving into this a little bit more deeply. But, you know, on a quick scroll, you can see the sheer volume of testimonials like this, but to really dive into one of them, to get a sense of how deep we can understand, you know, what is really going on here beneath the surface, I want to read you out one example of one of Hither's testimonials. So Hither is pragmatic without being impersonal. She provides such a wide variety of content that both makes her relatable and more impressive. Her content mentors me, inspires me, supports me, and informs me. As a woman of color, an investor, a business owner, a mama and wife, and as a human being, Hither excels. But unlike following the success porn of other wealthy older millennials, following her feels welcoming, honest, worthwhile for my brain and soul. She is constantly giving of herself. She re-answers the same questions, provides links over and over again, and responds to DMs. She's responded to many of mine. I would go as far to say she's my favorite Instagram follow of 2019 for sure, and maybe ever. It's just such a balanced, never toxic, never fake atmosphere. And yes, I have hit the T-Bell drive-through because Hither made it seem classy again. If they don't give her a brand deal, they're nuts. So even that is a Taco Bell reference. Hither was talking a lot about Taco Bell. We can explain that a little bit more later on. But this shows the level of connection that an individual feels to Hither in terms of the impact that she has had. And this is one of over 700 of these testimonials. And ultimately, this is the type of information that led us to start to work with Hither. We've now been working with her back since 2019 and consistently have seen that she's a really, really high performer on our campaigns on those intent to buy and lower funnel metrics, in a way that would not have been identifiable had we just looked at her engagement rate or potentially her audience size. And so in digging into these testimonials, we just looked at one and we saw the scroll. The really fascinating thing about this information is that you can kind of get the sense that if you were to put all of these people in a room, they would have so much in common and they would really get along. They have shared values, they have shared interests, they have had this shared experience of being impacted and influenced by this person in a similar way. And so to be able to see the specific human detail, but also juxtapose that with the survey details is such a fascinating thing to go through. And some of the things that jumped out at us from Hither's are that her audience feels mentored by her, not just inspired, but mentored. Her content cuts through that superficial feeling that so much content on social and on the internet in general has. She routinely answers her DMs. And again, she's ultimately able to move her audience to action. So she's if they're leaving a testimonial, the correlation between someone who's able to get that volume of testimonials and to be able to also drive someone in store, drive them to a website, drive a sale, there's a really, really strong correlation. And we've seen that time and time again. Okay. We have amazing Alexa on the line. So I wanted to give an example of one of the testimonials that ultimately it was one of the components that led Alexis to being selected for the Sephora squad. Testimonials, again, is a huge piece of that program because of the power that is embedded within them and how much we learn about the individuals who are on the program. So this is one of 1,000 for Alexa. So for someone who isn't into skincare, Glowpedia has taught me and helped me so much. Since the day I followed her, I've been following her advice and brand recommendations, and my skin has never looked better. Not only is she a wealth of knowledge, but she gives honest reviews and her honesty is so appreciated. I'd buy anything she told me because of how much I trust her recommendations. In a world of pyramid scheme skincare, she provides a path to true good products and skincare knowledge. So things that jumped out at us in terms of the patterns that we were seeing in Alexis testimonials, she's able to appeal to individuals about skincare, even though she's not exclusively focused on skincare. There's a lot of a common thread of honesty, and she has been able to cut through that really a category that ultimately is pretty saturated, and really, so many individuals who are speaking about a new product every day, but she's able to hold her audience's trust because of valuing that ultimately. So really incredible to see these types of patterns in individuals' content. So that's a little bit about testimonials. And again, we're going to talk about that more with our panelists, but another piece is filtering for verified reach and reach percentage. So it's one thing if you have an enormous audience, but you might only be reaching a really, really small percentage of them. So we're able to actually sort by how many, like the percentage on average that an individual is reaching if they have an active authentication into the Fohr platform. And this is important because, again, it doesn't necessarily mean that we're going to be going after those people who have on the surface an enormous following, at that macro level or even a mid-tier level. Even a micro level, sometimes the audience size really doesn't give you a whole lot of information about how active this audience is, how engaged they are. And so being able to see that number and filter by that is a really amazing piece. The next we want to talk about is something that is really, I think, kind of in a sense gone out of vogue or something is blog traffic. There's a huge industry perception that blogs are dead. It's not even something that comes up in conversation if we're talking to brands about the types of creators that we have access to, the types of data that we have access to, the platforms that we're on. So frequently the mentality is just that blogs are dying, blog traffic is done. But because we have access in general, on average, blog traffic is down. That is true. And user behavior has moved over to social. But for the individuals who are still able to drive hundreds of thousands of page views in some cases per month to a blog, when a user isn't just sitting there mindlessly scrolling and having that kind of lower barrier to entry interaction, it's incredibly powerful. This is, people who are sitting down at their computer, actively going to a URL and consuming this content. It shows that there's this huge connection that, again, is just fundamentally different to being fed something in a feed on a social platform. Okay. And so now we want to get into a couple of pieces that aren't exclusive to the Fohr platform or aren't a part of the Fohr platform and are more just, if you're someone out there who's working for a brand who is probably under an increased amount of pressure to make sure that you're spending every dollar wisely, that you're not draining budgets on people who aren't going to move the needle for your brand. May seem obvious, but digging into the comment sentiment, you would be amazed what you can learn. And I think a key piece of this isn't just looking at that kind of short, brief, generic, positive sentiment, but also really working to understand, are there questions being asked here? Are there responses to what this person's, are there even responses to jokes? We saw the Taco Bell reference in Hither's testimonials. To be able to see individuals interacting within the comments in a way that indicates they feel like they're friendly with this person or they trust them in the way that they would an expert and are asking a lot of questions is fundamentally different than the kind of prettiest, lovely images, gorge, goals side of the house, which is still positive, but to be able to really keep a keen eye out for this type of interaction is something that can really, really bear fruit as you look to engage the right partners. And again, outside of the Fohr platform, we do want to give some tips for things to keep an eye out for that just are really under-celebrated and undervalued and really not noticed in the way that they should be, again, especially by brands who are looking to spend wisely, who are looking to invest in the right partners. The first is looking out for people who have an ability to build a community on other platforms. So we've given the example here, like a Geneva, an ability to take your audience from one platform and move them over to another is, again, just that proof that you can take them from one place and move them to another, take an audience member and move them to action. So the ability to do that, to take someone from a platform as dominant as Instagram or TikTok and move them over to a more emerging platform like Geneva is a really huge indicator of that invisible influence. And again, to shout out Sophie, she's an influencer herself, and her dominant followings are on Instagram and TikTok, but she's a passionate reader. She's been able to let her audience know that she's starting a community on Geneva, and she's been able to have hundreds of those audience members follow her over and engage with her and with each other in a way that is very different to how they're engaging on Instagram and TikTok. So the ability to do that is definitely something to keep an eye out for as you're thinking about who to be investing in. The next is podcast listeners. I should also say you don't have to have all of these things. These are just things to keep an eye out for. Podcast, similar mentality to blog traffic in the sense that, on a social platform like an Instagram or a TikTok, you are being fed that content. You've opted into it. You are then being fed it. And it is a lower to barrier entry in that you don't have to actively go out and pursue it. Whereas if someone has been able to cultivate a podcast listener, not only is that individual actively going to listen, but they're really engaged for a long time in a similar way to YouTube. With YouTube, often it can come at a pretty penny, but it's visible. You can see how many subscribers someone has. You can see how many followers someone has. With podcast listeners, it's a little more under the radar. So it is a little bit more invisible, but it's something to keep an eye out for as you're identifying partners, and to be ultimately vetting for that and seeing if you can gather more data and information on those podcast listeners to be able to inform your selections. The next one is a high Twitter following. Again, another platform that is in some ways not as spoken about in influencer marketing anymore. Twitter influencer marketing is tough. Like, it's tough to land a sponsored post on Twitter. It definitely makes sense in some verticals with some creators, but because of the brevity, it is hard to actually do the sponsored content on Twitter. That said, if someone has a big Twitter following and they also have a following elsewhere, it shows or indicates that individuals aren't just interested in this person in terms of what they look like on the surface. They're also interested in what they're saying, their thoughts, their ideas. And Twitter, it's a different type of user behavior that is, if you're able to cultivate a following there as well as on Instagram or TikTok, it's a really interesting thing to keep an eye out for, because often that connection is much stronger. And again, it is often correlated with an ability to drive lower funnel metrics. And the final here is high newsletter subscribers. So again, there's more and more platforms that are emerging where individuals can run their own newsletter and have individuals subscribe to that newsletter. It might be, comparatively, it might seem like a really small number compared to an Instagram or a TikTok following. But again, it's a much deeper type of engagement with content. And so an individual who has been able to secure those subscribers or attract those subscribers and retain them typically then is able to engage more deeply as it relates to your products and brand. Okay. So with that, I think we're going to get into some chat. I'm going to stop sharing my screen for a moment. And I'm excited to introduce the wonderful Calvin Walker from our team. And I'll let him introduce himself in a little bit more detail, but he is an absolute delight and incredibly smart and wonderful. And we also have Hither Palapu, who I gave a little bit of insight to in terms of how we have worked with her at Fohr and her insane audience testimonials, but I'll also let you say a little hello as well.
Thank you, Grace. Hi, everyone. Again, my name is Calvin, Director of Strategy here at Fohr. I don't know if I can top that really lovely complimentary introduction from Grace just now, so I'll just say that I'm very excited to be here today, making my webinar debut, and I'm even more excited to chat with you, Hitha, so I'll let you say some words to introduce yourself.
Thank you so much, Calvin. Hi, everyone. I'm Hitha Palapu. I call myself a multi-hyphenate because I apparently can't stop saying no to job opportunities. So by day, I run a pharmaceutical company alongside with my father called Roshan Pharmaceuticals. And actually, it was our first company, Cytos, that inspired my first blog, Hitha on the Go. I am very sorry my child was supposed to be out of the house right now, but I think everyone is now used to it. So if you hear him in the background, I apologize. That blog began as I was traveling almost every single week as a young project manager at his emerging company. And when I started writing about how I was packing to travel for a business trip, into a weekend with girlfriends, into another business trip, all in a carry-on, people started really gravitating towards that content, and that's really what helped it grow. Out of that blog came my first book, How to Pack, Travel Smart for Any Trip. And even though in the recent years I've shifted to Instagram and a newsletter, I still keep writing books, keep speaking, keep answering all the questions on my Instagram stories, and I'm still working in pharma. So that's a little bit about me. And as far as Taco Bell goes, my mother bribed me to do Indian classical dance when I was a kid with the promise of Taco Bell if I danced to her standard, and a love affair began. So
I love that. I mean, I put in the chat already, I love Taco Bell, hot take or not, so I support this. So, Hitha, we've just run through how we think about invisible influence, which leads me to my first question for you. You mentioned as well, you started with a blog, but have since evolved over the years. So I'm curious, with all that you've done as a multifaceted creator, how would you define your invisible influence and how you've noticed your impact on your audience in ways that brands might not realize based on Vanity Metrics?
It's so interesting because I have a blog origin story like every other blogger out there, in a very technical, uncreative job, needed a creative outlet. And how that's evolved in the 12 years since it's been, maybe 13, is interesting because with the blog, I started it off just trying to share snippets of my life. But as I kind of identified and doubled down on this packing and travel niche, it really did then become, we all have such limited in time and energy in every single day. How do I give people solutions to help them save time and energy on the things they have to do, whether it be from packing to recipes, to the news, to what books you should read, so they have the time and energy to do what they actually want to do. And I think it was establishing that North Star in terms of, is this piece of content in service of this goal that I identified early on, but I have kept very much at the forefront of every piece of content I have created for the platforms I have chosen to focus on. So when I could no longer blog at the quality that I held myself to and that my audience was used to, I had to step away to say, okay, where can I do this in a more accessible manner? So it was Instagram, followed by a newsletter, had a podcast for a second. I really would like to bring it back, but the pandemic happened. And now it's an honor to have the trust of so many people who seek me out for career advice, gift giving advice, since it is that season, but also take, when I share about brands, both organically and in sponsorships, they take that advice and they know that I'm not putting my name on something that isn't something I have used and I truly love. And it's been wonderful to work with Fohr to connect me with the brands that I have been longtime fans of, whether it be Headspace or certain supplement companies, and get to create content alongside of them that really is in service of I'm helping people save time and energy on the things they have to do. Here's a product, here's a service, here's a tool that helps me do that. And I hope it's helpful for you.
I love that. And you just mentioned something about solutions for people and the community you've built. So I would love to take a moment to even dive deeper into that. We called out one of your testimonials in the presentation portion of the webinar. So what does it mean to you to receive these types of messages from your audience?
I have to tell you, when I'm having a bad day, I go into my testimonials page and read them because life is hard. We all get setbacks. We all have disappointments that we face with. That people took the time to write these testimonials, to go into such detail. It really reminds me and reaffirms me of the fact that I have the trust of so many people who have taken time and energy out of their day to do this for me. And that's something I keep top of mind in everything I do. And so I don't get super bogged down in certain vanity metrics because I really am focused on showing up for the people who have been a part of my community, whether they're new or whether they've been here for a while. So that really is sort of keeps me very focused on what I choose to share and create, who I choose to partner with, and to also craft content in a way that is in service of the brand's goals, but also is in line with how I know my audience is going to respond to it. I know what they will engage with. I know what they're going to say. This feels like very scripted and not you. What's going on? So it is very much a two-way relationship. And I have this opportunity because of that, not in spite of them. So I think it's a really important thing that I keep top of mind for myself.
And the word relationship, those are so complex and it's not always the same when you hop from one influencer to the next. So knowing that it is such a personal thing, this relationship you have with your audience, how do you showcase to brands the power and connection of your community and the power of your influence?
it depends on the brand and it depends on the product, because I think we have how I talk about fashion brands is a little bit different than how I talk about beauty, which is different than I talk about wellness, etc. But I do have a massive amount of DMs, and my poor editorial director, Tabor, deserves a big bonus at the end of the year, as well as a raise for managing my DMs and keeping track of the screenshots I sent her to send to potential brands, to send as our own positive feedback, some constructive feedback too, because I do appreciate it. It really is tracking those numbers. So platforms like Fohr and other affiliate networks like LTK, or even if they're not on LTK, I will create my own referral code as a customer and share that. That is how I like to back up sentiment with data. So making sure I can come to a brand and say, look, I have already converted X number of users to you organically, just by talking about it in these 3 Instagram story frames. I would love to be considered and discuss with you on how we could potentially work together. That's actually how we landed a partnership with the email client Superhuman. I had organically referred 400 people who signed up just based off of my regular link. And we reached out to them and said, so clearly I love you and my community loves you. Have you worked with creators before? Which they hadn't. Can we see what we could do together? And it was an incredibly successful partnership that continues on. And I still love Superhuman a lot. And I'm happy to share it with anyone who suffers from email overwhelm. But I do believe it is that it can't just be, I want to work with you. Has to be, this is where I bring value to you. And here's, I've already delivered value. And I look at building long-term relationships, like one and done campaigns. I believe that multiple touch points with my community, based whether it's in the newsletter, Instagram stories, feed, organic mentions, is a really important way to storytell around that brand. And that's how you also build trust, that your community knows this is not something that is new to you, that you are a long-time partner, you're a long-time user of these products or services. So it really has to be some data as well as sentiment and a desire to work together. One without the other, I don't think it's going to be meaningful for the brand or for the creator.
And one more question for you while I have you. When thinking about this slightly abstract concept of invisible influence, what would your advice be to brands when wanting to select creators to work with?
I get that follower count, engagement rate are the easy metrics to attract, and it makes sense. I hear you as well. That said, I think take a look and ask your team and ask people in your life who are not very online, who they follow. Sometimes it will be the biggest names. Sometimes it'll be extremely niche accounts that have wonderful engagement, who have robust conversations in the comment section, whose highlights are actually well organized and bring value, and who you could tell there's an authenticity with people who I think are more fall into the invisible influence category of, I'm doing this because I really love it. And of course, it's become an incredible livelihood for me, as well as so many creators who have come up in this industry. But at any point, if it stops being fun or you seem resentful towards your community or whatnot, it doesn't matter how big you are. Like, I think if you lose the respect, you have lost your brand as a creator. So take a look at those comments, as you guys had recommended earlier today, and see the quality of those comments. Take a look at those Instagram stories when they do a Q&A to see the level of detail at which they're responding. If it is purely to just share links to try to grab that money, these aren't people who are necessarily going to storytell and therefore convert for you. So I would actually take a look at, go dig deeper. That time, the ROI on your time is going to be worth it, because I think you're going to find a handful of partners you can work with for a long period of time that are going to bring value to you. You're going to bring value to them and to their audiences, and everyone's bottom lines and lives will be better.
Perfect. I think that's awesome. The reminder for people to dig deep when wanting to work with creators, because as we know, icebergs are very deep. There's a lot to cover there. So Hitha, thank you so much for chatting with me. You shared a lot of great points. I want to take a moment to also turn it over to my amazing colleague, Sophie, bring her back to the proverbial stage. So I'm going to go off camera for a moment, but again, Hitha, thank you for the chat today.
Thanks, Calvin.
Hello.
So surprise, I'm not Sophie Wood. So it seems like we might be having a little bit of a technical difficulty on Sophie's part, but I think that's okay. We can bring Alexa to the stage if Alexa wants to join me.
Hi there.
Hi, Alexa. How are you?
I am doing great. How are you, Calvin?
You know, we're moving and grooving on this Thursday afternoon.
We really are.
So while we're here, thank you as well for joining. And again, we got a little bit of background on you earlier, but Alexa, if you'd like to take a moment as well to introduce yourself, I think that'd be great.
Sure. Yeah. I am a skincare creator on Instagram and TikTok, Pinterest, YouTube. I basically started when it's kind of a wild story. I was struggling with postpartum depression with my son, and of course, my doctors recommended medication and therapy, and I did that. But then they also really wanted to make sure that I had a way to kind of reconnect with myself. And they encouraged me to find something to do that would be just me. And so kind of another little backstory, I grew up with my mom, who is an esthetician, talking all about skincare. And that's been my life for as long as I can remember. And when I was presented with this challenge to find something to connect with myself and kind of find my identity outside of being just a mom. I don't want to say just a mom because moms are superheroes too, but I wanted to find myself outside of being a mom. And I thought, why don't I start an Instagram account where I just talk about something I'm passionate about, which is skincare, and it has nothing to do with motherhood, right? And I went there for a community. I was craving connection. I was craving finding myself again. And I absolutely did. It really resonated with a lot of people. And I've been on Instagram for almost 4 years now, and I have found my community.
That's amazing. Hey, Alexa, I'm jumping on back in. Oh, look out. Here we go. Amazing. I mean, I think something that I have found really interesting too in looking at some of these individuals who, again, have a really, really tight-knit community and who have a lot of testimonials or have an amazing ability to move their audience from one place to another. Often it is because there's been coverage or openness or vulnerability about a topic that might not just be products or might not just be recommendations. So I think it's also an interesting point that you make that, like, you went for the community, you ultimately found your community back, but that has led to a place where now through that openness and through, you know, the vulnerability, it's led to a place where your audience is trusting you beyond or like in all of these other different categories. So it's an interesting piece.
Oh, absolutely. I think also I just know there's so many influencers. The skincare industry is so saturated at this point. And I think people just really crave community. They don't want someone there that's going to be shoving products down their throat, slinging it. My audience knows and has been with me for so long that they know that I'm not here for a cash grab. I'm not here just to jump on the trend. I'm here because I really, truly want to be here and connect with everyone.
100%. And I think, you know, obviously you're a part of the Fohr squad, which again, it's such an incredible program because I think the way that we've always thought about the individuals who have ended up on it is that if we didn't have access to this type of information to be able to hear directly from the audiences, we would have fundamentally ended up with a completely different group of people every year than we ultimately have. And so I think I'd love to hear from you on what you feel brands are maybe missing when they're looking at vetting their influencer partners, and maybe where they're spending too much attention versus where you think they should be spending more attention.
Yeah, I think it's so easy for brands to fall into the vanity metrics, the likes, the comments, the link clicks, the story views. But I think it's really important to look deeper. Like, I love how you guys brought up the questions, the comments. I think what brands will see if they go to my page is that there's so many comments more than just the fire emoji. People are really coming there asking me, what was that retinol you talked about 4 months ago, and they're leaving it in the comments of a new video or DMing me. For example, I had this one message today and somebody said, 3 months ago, you talked about a self tanner, and it was in an orange bottle. Do you have any idea what I'm talking about? I said, oh my gosh, yes. That was the Tan Luxe self tanning drops. I talked about that. Truly, months ago, This follower made a note, didn't know, couldn't remember, but she knew that she could DM me and I was going to see it and I would know what she was talking about. So I think that's what my community is about, is it's a long-term thing. When they see me talking about something, it doesn't mean they're going to click on that link and they're going to buy it right away. I think one of my favorite examples is I had somebody recently say, tell me the story. And this is how I measure my invisible influence. Okay, here's the story. And I don't think brands understand that this happens in the background. Ready? So I had a gal who I've been chatting with a little bit in my DMs, active in my DMs. And she said, I have to tell you this. I went on a girls' trip recently, and this is how you have influenced us all, whether they know is from you or not. She said, I saw you talking about a sunscreen. I sent it to the group chat. Nobody had heard of the sunscreen. I'd asked if anyone had tried it. One of my friends went to Sephora the next day, bought it, then went back to the group chat and said, this is incredible, you guys. We all went and bought the sunscreen, used it on the trip, and now we are all converted fans of this sunscreen. We also follow you all now. That's not something that I can send to a brand that I did a campaign for 3 months ago or 2 months ago. That just gets lost. People don't know. It spreads like a wildfire. And I think that's really common.
Totally. Well, I think both of those examples are so powerful. And I think such an example of the deeper issue in a way where we're kind of expecting and again, we talked a little bit about like it being Q4, it being a recessionary environment, it being holiday, marketers being under a lot of pressure. And there's been a huge uptick for us in like every brand saying, hey, this is our first campaign we've ever done with you. We wanted to go live really, really quickly. We want immediate conversion to sale, and we want it to all be trackable, and we want a really, really high ROAS number, and all on the first campaign and in a really, really short period of time. And I think it's kind of forgetting the fact that when a community member of yours says, what was that thing in the orange bottle? It's because upper funnel and building awareness and building brand recognition is something that advertisers and marketers have been doing for decades without the expectation that the first time you see something, that's when you add it into your cart immediately. And I think that that's just not the way that humans typically shop. So it is a long game, and it is something that sometimes I think marketers are a little bit misdirected in the sense that like to try and be so short-sighted essentially as to say like, maybe I don't personally shop like this, but I want the audience of this to see something and then immediately convert. It just feels a little not the way to go.
Oh, I would pass on that campaign if I was presented for it. It doesn't matter if I love the product. If those expectations were laid out, that is not, I think creators with invisible influence, and including myself, we thrive when it can be a long-term thing, when there's no pressure. I think brands that I have worked with in the past, if you were able to talk to them, they'd say that I over-deliver, that I am consistent with what I post. And I kind of like what Hitha was saying, we circle back. And that's kind of what the authenticity portion is. Our followers know that we're not just throwing up a product for a cash grab or just to say something. They know that when we talk about a product, it's going to be a product that we actually use, we actually love and recommend. And we're going to talk about that consistently. If you're obsessed with a product, are you talking about it once? Absolutely not. You are bringing it up over and over across multiple platforms.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think, again, you know, as much as I think another piece of this is that as we think about that first click, not last click mentality of like, you see something, oh, I've seen this orange bottle. I like the sound of it. I trust this person. They're influential over me. I'm going to click on it. I'm not going to immediately put that in my cart, but I'm going to maybe remember it. I think the other piece that maybe we aren't talking about here is that to get to that lower funnel metric, often marketers are still using the influencer content to drive that deeper, like to actually get someone to put it in the cart and purchase. But again, it's not necessarily something that is trackable or is immediately pulled back to you on the organic side. Because if I think about the way that I shop, I mean, I actually don't know if I've ever looked at something on Instagram or TikTok and seen it once and then immediately gone and bought it. So I think there's a huge amount of like, that it truly is invisible. Yeah. So many, like Sophie was talking before about how many trackable sales we've seen from partners where it is proven. But outside of that, there's just this whole other bundle that would be negligent of marketers to not pursue in the way that we've always pursued TV, we've always pursued radio, we've always pursued all of these other traditional forms of media where that immediate conversion isn't the expectation.
Right. Absolutely. I think that does work for the immediate conversion, works for Gen Z on TikTok when they say it's a viral product, it's going to sell out. People might run quick, get it, but you only do that once or twice before you realize if they come on with that tag viral product, it's overhyped. People are getting smarter, and just by calling something a viral product that's going to sell out, get it now, they're tired. They want something that's actually real and worth their time and money.
100%. Amazing. Well, Alexa, thank you so much. I think we've got about 5 minutes left. We might bring back our other panelists onto camera to answer. There's a handful of questions we have here in the chat, and our tech problem over here on the Fohr office Wi-Fi. I now have Sophie in the room with me if you'd like to join over here as well for answering any of these questions. But that was also awesome. Thank you so much. I think the first question that we have in here is, we've touched on this a little bit, but does invisible influence mean a higher ROI, or how does it relate directly to conversion? So we've touched on this a little bit, but does anyone want to speak to the connection between the two?
I wouldn't typically look at it as direct and immediate ROI, but also take a look at kind of long tail effect from that campaign. And I would even say before, when the creator was organically talking about your products or services. So it's not as much of a specific number, though you would want to see an increase in, followers on a platform that was delivered on it, hopefully some sales, obviously, as a part of that partnership. But are you seeing sustained and even long tail new customers or repeat customers or whatnot out of that particular engagement? And how are people talking about your product on that creator's comments section on Instagram or on your own page? So it goes deeper than direct ROI, but it goes, how is your brand welcomed and retained some of this new awareness and the new customers that these creators have brought to you? And I'd be very curious to hear Alexa's answer as well.
Oh, we're on the same page, Hitha. It's absolutely a long-term thing. And I think what's interesting is most campaigns that I've worked on, they ask for insights within 1 or 2 weeks. And I'm happy to give those over, but I think for individuals who have invisible influence, it's the long game. You're not going to see those insights either. There's no trackable sales in there. It's more brand awareness for the people that also become repeat customers as well. We like to take our time and our purchasing power and making sure that we are buying a product that we're going to come back to. People who the one-off product real quick, I've had a lot of people return those. And I can see that in my, like if I go to LTK, and I don't like that. I don't want people to be buying products that really quick just to return it. I want them to be making an informed decision and enjoy that and then become repeat customers.
And I also think that ROI depends on the brand. Like sometimes we immediately think that that results in revenue, but I think so many brands have different KPIs where ROI is different. And I think a good example of that, in that case, I feel like ROI and invisible influence are connected. But again, to hit that Alexis point, it's not just like you partner with them once, then you see the sales conversion. I think a good example of that is that Prada was one of the first companies to work with TikTokers on like a macro level, and specifically Gen Z. And when you think about Gen Z, they don't have, dispensable income, and Prada is a luxury brand. But what they found was by doing this Prada bucket hat challenge with all of these TikTokers, it ended up being the most favorited item on list.com. And then I just saw a report today that Prada is now the second most sought after brand on list.com. And in that sense, it's like you have now shown an ROI that you have awareness and affinity for Gen Z of Prada, which is then going to last their entire adulthood. And so I think in that sense, it's like that is an ROI where it's not like sales conversion, but you've just captured the interest of the consumer that's going to be the mass majority of the market for the next, 30 years.
Absolutely. And I think that seeding desire and building desire over time, whether it's for a luxury product that takes even longer to convert someone, because a luxury purchase typically isn't a very rational one. You want it for an emotional reason, and the perception of that brand has been built over time, historically by that brand directly, but even before influencers in the social sense that we think of them, there was still individuals who built that brand to an echelon or a place where you were like, I'm willing to spend $500 on a bucket hat and put it on my head. And it's, again, not a rational purchase. That desire needs to be seeded and built over time, in the same way that, the orange skincare bottle or whatever it might be. If you're standing in, whether it's for a luxury product or even for a mass product, when there's an individual standing in that aisle deciding between 4 different sunscreens, sometimes it is just, oh, this is one that I've seen before, and I think I remember liking that. That is ultimately sometimes how simple it can be. And in order to get there, there needs to be that upper funnel, mid funnel, and from people that you're trusting and hearing from with this invisible influence. So I think that's a great point to end on. And we are at time at 2:00. So there's a few additional questions in the chat. We're going to send out, a lot of them are about whether we are going to be sharing the slides from today, which we are. So those will be sent over to you on email. But I want to just say a huge thank you to everyone for joining, and a huge thank you to Hither and Alexa for spitting all of this knowledge today and sharing your experiences with us. Thank you to Calvin and Soph. Sorry about the tech difficulties, everyone, but really appreciate the time today and excited to continue the conversation.